call it the music straight from the devil's workshop. Some call it an exercise in syncopation. Some call it the melting pot of cultures and genres, styles and ideas. But how does one define this phenomenon called jazz?
Jazz is an improvised music. It's a rhythmic music. It was born of the streets rather than as an intellectual kind of music in the beginning. Has developed to be a very artistic music that still has the character of the street, so it covers a very large spectrum. It was born specifically out of the African American experience having to do with oppression, adversity, slavery, and so forth, you know, through the blues, through the Christian church, gospel music, for example. But I think that jazz really speaks about the ability of human beings.
Some call it the music straight from the devil's workshop. Some call it an exercise in syncopation. Some call it the melting pot of cultures and genres, styles and ideas. But how does one define this phenomenon called jazz?
A person attempts to give a definition at one time. The next time somebody asks him the same question, he might give a completely different answer, because there is no definite answer to describe exactly what jazz is, you know. For me, I would say that jazz is an improvised music. It's a rhythmic music. It was born of the streets rather than as an intellectual kind of music in the beginning. Has developed to be a very artistic music that still has the character of the street, so it covers a very large spectrum. It was born specifically out of the African American experience having to do with oppression, adversity, slavery, and so forth, you know, through the blues, through the Christian church, gospel music, for example. But I think that jazz really speaks about the ability of human beings in general, no matter where you come from, to be able to take adversity and translate it into something that's really positive, something that's creative, something that's medicinal, something that's nourishing for yourself and for others. That's what I think jazz is.
So, improvisation is the heart and soul of jazz. Jazz is the musical experience of the passing moment. A jazz musician, especially while playing solo, never refers to the musical notation, and he can never play the same piece the same way twice. The improvisational nature of jazz has its roots in its origins. The workers in the cotton plantations of southern USA expressed their feelings and their nostalgia for their native land through the songs they sang. Their songs must have heard something like this.
Majingo sendi tena, majingo sendi tena, kunandegeza mitambo. Moyo wangu wamituma mema, niwe mwanachama wa daima. Sitaweza kuliwacha rumba, bila moyo kunituma. Moyo wangu wamituma mema, niwe mwanachama wa daima. Sitaweza kuliwacha rumba, bila moyo kunituma. Harambe, harambe.
These workers were not formally trained in music, and their scales and harmony were purely intuitive. What emerged as a recognized musical scale of jazz was something utterly original, so far as Western music was concerned.
Most fundamental scale in Western music is the diatonic scale, most commonly known as the major scale. I'd now like to play the C major scale in 1 octave. Here now is the same scale in 2 octaves.
A scale that begins with F instead of C is called F major scale.
F major scale in 3 octaves. Now, by flattening the 3rd, the 5th, and the 7th note of the major scale, we arrive at what we have called the blues scale. So now let's have an example of that.
The Afro-American singers used this in their musical compositions. The flattening of the third in the C major scale, that is E, and the fifth, that is G, and the seventh, that is B, gave a soulful, melancholic mood to their compositions.
The blues scale has gone a long way and has been included in practically all forms of music. Especially in jazz, the blues has taken an integral part, and many modifications, many extensions, many alterations, many embellishments have been added to the blues scale, and elaborations such as flattened fifths, flattened ninths, flattened 13s, sharpened 9s, sharpened 13s, and so forth.
It is said that blues are an acid test for any jazz musician. It has the vast emotional potential for any player to discover.
Minor blues is normally based on any of the three minor scales. The first one being the natural minor scale, which is normally the relative of the F major scale. So when we play from D to D, we get the natural minor scale in D minor. The next one is the harmonic minor. In this one, the seventh degree of the scale is sharpened. It gives us an oriental type of feel. Sounds somewhat like this. And finally, the melodic minor. This minor is different while ascending and descending. While ascending, we have the sixth and seventh note sharpened, and while descending, it comes back to the natural minor scale. Well, most of you might be wondering what a chord is all about. When we normally play three notes and more together, it's called a chord. A three-note chord is known as a triad. In a triad, we utilize the root, the third, and the fifth, which makes a C major chord. Now, when you flatten the third note, you get a C minor. And when you flatten the seventh note, you get a C7. On a guitar, you could play as far as sixth note chords. So here's one, the B flat major seventh. Pianists normally have a wider span and a wider range of chords because they can play chords with two hands. So whereby they are able to play polytonal chords, block chords, and superimposed chords. It's playing one chord against another. But on guitar, they are mostly restricted to 6 strings, and we can't normally play like a pianist would, but by using inversions and close chord formations, we can play most of the chords close to what the piano is doing. So we can play a 13th more or less like this.
Chords are named by the scale step on which they are based. A 1 chord is based on the first step of the scale, that is Do. Second chord is based on Re.
Most of the songwriters base their tunes on chord progressions. A chord progression is normally a set of chords progressing in various contexts, like the cycle of fourths, the cycle of fifths, and the 1-6-2-5 progression, etc. Now, to give you a demonstration on the cycle of fourths, what it means is these chords move in what you call fourth intervals. So from E7, A7, D7 to G7, G7 to C7, C7 to F7.
So that was 1-4-1-4 progression.
The common blues progression is built around the 1-4-5 progression. So in the key of C, it will be C, F, and G7. I'll play a bit of the common blues progression in F. Now we'll move into the jazz 12-bar blues progression, whereby we use a lot of chord extensions, chord embellishments, and substitutions. Like, for instance, if I did a C7th chord, instead of this I would play a C7 flat 9th, a C7 sharp 9, a C7 flat 9 flat 5, or C7 sharp 9 sharp 5.
A blues number may be fast or slow, happy or sad. It may be purely instrumental, or it may have lyrics.
The song Blue Prelude, also based on the minor blues scale, tends to get a little different because a middle section is added to it, making it a 32-bar blues. The middle section comprises of the 2-5-1 progression, and finally the tail end comes back to the blues scale.
Let me sigh, let me cry when I'm blue. Let me go away from this lonely town. Won't be long till my song here is through, 'cause I know I'm on my last go-round.
Contemporary jazz is full of technical virtuosity, which were evolved by constant experimentation and improvisation. Masters like Louis Armstrong, Duke Ellington, Charlie Parker, Dizzy Gillespie, John Coltrane, Ornette Coleman, Miles Davis, Thelonious Monk, and of course Herbie Hancock are all milestones in the history of the evolution of jazz. The form of jazz has been changing constantly under their influence. One of the interesting styles of piano playing that evolved at the end of the 19th century and contributed to the early evolution of jazz is called ragtime. Ragtime is basically an improvisation of the melody on the same harmonic structure. Musicians like Scott Joplin and Jelly Roll Morton composed some famous ragtime numbers. Here's a delightful number, Maple Leaf Rag by Scott Joplin. Around this time, small ragtime bands developed in New Orleans, the port city in southern USA where jazz was born. When a group of people were enslaved, transported to thousands of kilometers through untold hardships, made to work for long hours in abject poverty and misery, they expressed themselves in song and music. That was how jazz was born. It is a child of sorrow, of exploitation, of nostalgia. True, later it transformed itself according to situations.
I have the opportunity to present music that was born in my country, but music that serves the world, music that was originally created in my country, but a music that continues to be created throughout the world, and pretty much every country that I've been to. There's jazz somewhere. Somebody's playing it. Somebody who was born in that particular country is playing jazz, because jazz speaks about people, not just about Americans. The gentleman over there on trumpet, his name is Darren Barrett. And on saxophone, from Germany, his name is Ignaz Diné. On trombone, Jamal Haynes. On guitar from Israel, Ofer Ganor. Now, we get to the drummer, Sean Thomas. Sean Thomas on drums. And now we have on bass from Oswego, New York, which is kind of up in the northern part of New York, and also via Maui, Hawaii, is Keala Kaumeheiwa. Then we get to another American from Houston, Texas. She's a real Texan, right? Texas Longhorn, right? Her name is Helen Sung. Thank you very much.